There are rooms where nobody argues with you, and yet tension fills the air so heavily that you can almost feel it pressing against your skin. A table full of smiling faces. Quiet laughter, compliments, encouragement. Someone congratulates you for your progress. Someone tells you they are proud of you. Someone raises a glass in your honor, and still, something feels wrong, because while they speak to you, they are also studying you, measuring you, comparing themselves to you, calculating where they stand beside you. Human beings rarely announce competition openly. Open hostility is primitive. Transparent envy is embarrassing. Society teaches people to hide ambition behind politeness and conceal resentment beneath emotional intelligence. So the modern rival does not always attack you directly. Sometimes they support you publicly while privately hoping you slow down. Not every competitor stands against you. Some stand beside you, and that is what makes hidden competition psychologically disturbing. The danger is not always betrayal itself. The danger is ambiguity, the uncertainty of never fully knowing whether someone genuinely wants the best for you or simply wants reassurance that you will never rise beyond them. You have probably felt this before without fully understanding it. A strange shift in someone's energy after your success, a subtle distance after your improvement, at a compliment that somehow felt cold, an uncomfortable silence after good news. At first you ignored it, because most people are taught to distrust their instincts. We are conditioned to believe that noticing tension is paranoia, that recognizing envy is arrogance, that questioning intentions makes you cynical. But human beings are pattern recognition creatures, and sometimes your mind notices contradictions before your emotions are ready to accept them. You are not paranoid for noticing patterns. Throughout history, power was rarely threatened by obvious enemies alone. Kings feared trusted advisors more than foreign armies. Political leaders were often destroyed by allies sitting closest to them. Philosophers wrote endlessly about envy because they understood something uncomfortable about human nature. People compare themselves instinctively, even with those they love, especially with those they love, because comparison is deeply emotional. A stranger's success may irritate you for a moment, but the success of someone close to you forces a more painful question. What does their growth say about me? And that question quietly reshapes relationships. You thought loyalty looked like honesty, but sometimes loyalty smiles while resentment grows underneath. This does not mean every friendship is fake. It does not mean every person secretly hates you. That would be simplistic. Human psychology is far more complex than that. People can genuinely care about you while simultaneously feeling threatened by you. They can love you and compete with you at the same time. They can support you emotionally while unconsciously resenting the way your growth exposes their stagnation. This contradiction exists because human beings are not driven only by connection. They are also driven by positioning, status, identity, relevance, the need to feel valuable within a social hierarchy. And most people never fully escape this instinct. That is why smiles become masks, support becomes strategic, friendship becomes psychological negotiation. Most dangerous tension is silent comparison. You see it in workplaces where co-workers celebrate promotions with forced enthusiasm. You see it in families where achievement creates invisible distance. You see it in friendships where one person evolves while the other quietly struggles with feelings they cannot openly admit because society punishes visible envy. So envy adapts. It becomes subtle, refined, civilized. A person may never openly sabotage you. Instead, they slowly withdraw warmth. They become less emotionally available, less enthusiastic, less present. Not because they consciously hate you, but because your existence has become psychologically uncomfortable for them. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. Many people do not even realize they are doing it because hidden competition often operates beneath conscious awareness. It emerges through tone, behavior, hesitation, and emotional inconsistency long before it becomes visible in words. That is why certain interactions leave you emotionally confused instead of clearly wounded. Nothing obvious happened. No insult was spoken. No attack was made. And yet you leave feeling smaller, heavier, strangely unsettled. Your nervous system sensed something your rational mind could not yet explain. There is a reason ancient philosophers obsessed over envy, ego, and human weakness. They understood that people rarely reveal their deepest motives directly. Civilization did not remove primal instincts. It simply taught people how to disguise them more elegantly. And in the modern world, where reputation is everything, concealment becomes survival. The person competing with you rarely announces it because hidden rivalry provides access to your trust, access to your weaknesses, access to your emotional blind spots. Silence is not absence. It is a strategy. The frightening truth is that some people do not necessarily want your life destroyed. They simply want to ensure your life never rises too far above theirs. As long as the balance remains equal, the relationship feels stable. But once the balance shifts, human behavior begins to change. And this raises an uncomfortable philosophical question. Why do human beings compete even with the people they claim to love? Human beings like to believe they are rational creatures. We tell ourselves that we judge people fairly, that we value kindness over status, character over success, authenticity over appearance. But beneath civilization, beneath morality, beneath modern language and polished behavior, there is still an ancient instinct operating quietly inside almost everyone: comparison. Long before human beings built nations, companies, or digital identities, survival depended on social positioning within tribes. Your place in the hierarchy affected access to resources, protection, influence, and reproduction. To fall too low in status was not merely embarrassing. It was dangerous, and even though the modern world looks different, the psychological machinery remains almost identical. The human brain is still constantly asking the same ancient questions. Where do I stand? Who has more power than me? Who is more respected? Who is becoming more valuable? Am I falling behind? Most people never hear these questions consciously. They experience them emotionally instead. That strange discomfort when someone your age becomes more successful, that subtle irritation when a friend improves faster than you expected, that quiet satisfaction when someone impressive finally fails. These reactions are not always signs of cruelty. Often they are signs of insecurity colliding with comparison. You believed people judged you based on who you are. Often they judge you based on what your existence says about them, and this is why hidden competition becomes unavoidable in human relationships. Because every achievement unconsciously changes social positioning. Every improvement creates psychological contrast. Every transformation forces observation. The moment you become more disciplined, more confident, more respected, more attractive, more financially successful, or more emotionally independent, people around you are no longer simply interacting with you. They are also interacting with themselves through you. Your growth becomes a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable. This is why people often support you until you surpass them. As long as your ambition feels harmless, it inspires others. But once your progress begins disrupting their internal narrative, inspiration quietly transforms into tension. Not always hatred, not always sabotage, sometimes just emotional distance, a subtle shift in warmth, a strange change in tone that nobody openly acknowledges. Think about the moment someone's energy towards you changed. Was it after you failed or after you succeeded? Modern psychology calls this social comparison theory. Human beings naturally evaluate themselves relative to others. But what makes this process dangerous is that comparison rarely remains objective. Ego becomes involved. Identity becomes involved. Self-worth becomes involved. And once the ego feels threatened, the mind begins protecting itself. A person may convince themselves you became arrogant simply because your confidence reminds them of their insecurity. They may downplay your achievements to preserve their own identity. They may subtly criticize your growth because accepting your transformation would force them to confront their own stagnation. This is ego preservation, not deliberate evil. Psychological defense. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once observed that envy in human beings is natural, while compassion is rare. It was a brutally pessimistic view of human nature, but history repeatedly supports it. Entire political movements, intellectual rivalries, and social conflicts have been fueled not only by ideology, but by wounded ego disguised as morality. Even Niccolo Machiavelli understood that human loyalty often depends on self-interest more than virtue. People remain emotionally supportive while the relationship benefits their identity. But once power begins shifting unevenly, hidden emotions emerge. This happens everywhere, in families where siblings silently compete for validation, in friendships where success changes emotional balance, in workplaces where cooperation masks rivalry, even in romantic relationships. People unconsciously measure power, desirability, and emotional leverage against each other. And social media has amplified this instinct beyond anything previous generations experienced. Today, comparison is no longer occasional. It is constant. People wake up and immediately consume evidence of other people's beauty, wealth, intelligence, relationships, lifestyles, opportunities, and achievements. Every scroll becomes psychological exposure to invisible hierarchy. The modern world transformed identity into performance. People no longer simply live life. They present life, carefully edited. Happiness. Strategic vulnerability, curated. Success, even authenticity itself, has become performative, and the deeper problem is that endless exposure to comparison creates status anxiety, the fear that your value is decreasing relative to others. This fear quietly controls behavior more than most people realize. It shapes ambition, fashion, opinions, social circles, political beliefs, and even morality, because many people are not chasing fulfillment. They are chasing psychological reassurance. Reassurance that they matter. Reassurance that they are progressing. Reassurance that they are not invisible. And when someone close to them rises too quickly, that reassurance becomes unstable. This is why subtle envy can exist even in people who genuinely care about you. Human emotions are contradictory. Someone can love you and still feel threatened by your evolution. They can celebrate your success intellectually while emotionally struggling with what it represents. Human beings are capable of affection and comparison simultaneously. That contradiction is what makes hidden competition emotionally confusing, because the smile may be real, but so is the tension underneath it. And the most dangerous form of competition is not open hostility. It is competition hidden beneath politeness. Human beings rarely survive by revealing exactly what they feel. Civilization rewards emotional control. It rewards restraint, presentation, social intelligence, and strategic behavior. From childhood, people learn which emotions are acceptable to display and which emotions must remain hidden. Anger is softened into sarcasm. Jealousy disguises itself as concern. Resentment becomes politeness, and over time, people become so skilled at emotional concealment that even they no longer fully recognize their own motives. This is why hidden competition is so difficult to detect. Open hostility is obvious. A direct enemy gives clarity, but hidden resentment operates quietly beneath social rituals. It smiles, it congratulates, it remains close enough to observe you while protecting itself behind emotional ambiguity, because appearing supportive is socially advantageous. Smiles maintain access, kindness protects reputation. Passive competition avoids confrontation. In the modern world, the most effective rival is not always the loudest person in the room. Often, it is the person who never openly opposes you, or the co-worker who compliments your promotion but subtly minimizes your achievement in conversations with others. the friend who encourages your goals until your progress becomes undeniable, the person who disappears emotionally the moment your confidence stops depending on their validation. At first, these behaviors seem insignificant. Small inconsistencies, slight changes in tone, delayed enthusiasm. But human beings communicate far more through emotional energy than words. A delayed response to success can reveal more than an argument. A forced smile can expose more than criticism. Selective enthusiasm is one of the clearest signs of hidden comparison. Some people celebrate your small victories because those victories feel manageable. But when your growth becomes real, when your discipline creates results, when your status genuinely rises, when your identity transforms, their emotional response changes, not always consciously, but noticeably, because your evolution begins, disrupting the psychological balance between you. Some people do not want your life. They want reassurance that you are not becoming more powerful than them. And power is not only money or influence. Psychological power matters just as much. Confidence is power. Independence is power. Emotional stability is power. The ability to stop seeking approval changes social dynamics more than most people realize. When insecure people sense this shift, they often respond indirectly rather than honestly. They disguise discouragement as realism. They present limitation as wisdom. They subtly lower others to protect their own position. Emotionally, you're changing. You think too highly of yourself now. Be realistic. Don't get carried away. The words sound harmless. Sometimes they even sound caring. But underneath them is often an unconscious attempt to restore old balance, because growth threatens people who benefited from your smaller identity. This is why ambitious individuals often become isolated, not necessarily because success changes them into worse people, but because transformation changes the emotional contracts around them. Every relationship contains unspoken expectations. Who leads? Who needs validation? Who feels superior? Who remains dependent? Who stays safe? And when one person evolves beyond those expectations, tension emerges. People reveal themselves most clearly when your growth changes the balance between you. History is filled with examples of public loyalty masking private rivalry. Royal courts appeared elegant on the surface, yet beneath the politeness existed constant psychological warfare. Advisors smiled beside kings while secretly competing for influence. Intellectual circles praised each other publicly while quietly resenting recognition they themselves never received. Even philosophers understood this darkness within social behavior. The closer people stand to power, talent, beauty, or influence, the more comparison intensifies. Familiarity does not eliminate envy. It often deepens it. This is why betrayal rarely comes from strangers. Strangers do not study your life closely enough, but people near you do. They witness your growth in real time. They remember your weaker version. They compare your present identity against the past version they understood psychologically. And if your transformation forces them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, emotional resistance quietly forms. Not every friend is fake. Not every competitor is malicious. That is important to understand. Many people struggling with hidden envy are fighting internal battles. They barely understand themselves. Human beings are emotionally contradictory. Someone can care about you deeply while simultaneously feeling threatened by your progress. They can love you and resent what your success reminds them about their own unrealized potential. This is what makes hidden competition emotionally confusing rather than obvious. The warmth is partially real, but so is the discomfort underneath it. And perhaps the darkest realization is this: many relationships remain stable only while power stays equal. The moment the balance changes, people begin revealing who they truly are. There is a moment in every transformation when people around you begin reacting differently, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The calls become less frequent. The energy shifts. The enthusiasm fades. Conversations feel heavier. Something invisible changes in the emotional atmosphere between you and the people who once seemed closest. And at first, you blame yourself. Maybe you became distant, maybe success changed you, maybe ambition made you cold. But sometimes the deeper truth is far more uncomfortable. Your growth changed the balance. Human relationships are not built only on affection. They are also built on emotional structure. Unspoken roles form inside every friendship, family, workplace, and social circle. One person becomes the confident one, another becomes the dependent one. One becomes the advisor, another becomes the insecure one seeking reassurance. And once those roles stabilize, people unconsciously grow attached to them. This is why transformation creates tension, because the moment you evolve beyond your old identity, you disrupt the emotional agreements people had with you. Some people loved the version of you that needed them, the insecure version, the uncertain version, the version that asked permission before making decisions, the version that stayed small enough to protect everyone else's comfort. But growth changes psychological dynamics more than words ever can. The moment you stop constantly seeking approval, the dynamics begin to change. When you become more disciplined, people who lack discipline feel exposed around you. When you become emotionally stable, chaotic people lose influence over you. When you become ambitious, passive people begin questioning their own choices. Your evolution becomes offensive to those committed to remaining the same, not because growth is wrong, but because human beings instinctively compare themselves to those closest to them. And when your transformation becomes undeniable, it silently forces others to confront uncomfortable truths they spent years avoiding. This is why success exposes insecurity. A confident person can celebrate your progress without feeling diminished by it. But an insecure person experiences your growth differently. Your success becomes evidence. Evidence that change was possible. Evidence that discipline mattered. Evidence that excuses may not have been as permanent as they claimed. And the ego hates evidence that threatens identity. So the mind protects itself. Psychologists call this projection. People transfer uncomfortable emotions onto others rather than confronting them internally. Instead of admitting envy, they convince themselves you became arrogant. Instead of acknowledging insecurity, they criticize your ambition. Instead of facing their stagnation, they frame your transformation as betrayal. This is why ambitious people often lose old friendships. Not always because success corrupts them, but because growth destroys emotional compatibility with people psychologically attached to their older identity. Who became distant when you became disciplined? That question reveals more about human relationships than most people are prepared to admit. History repeatedly shows this pattern. Political leaders were often betrayed not during weakness, but during moments of rising influence. Philosophers and intellectuals who gained recognition frequently became isolated from former allies. Even within revolutionary movements, unity often collapsed once status and influence shifted unevenly. Power changes relationships, but so does potential. Sometimes people are not reacting to your current success. They are reacting to what they fear you may become, because human beings often tolerate equals more comfortably than rising individuals. A struggling person becoming successful disrupts social hierarchy emotionally. It forces observers to re-evaluate themselves. And many people would rather distance themselves from that discomfort than confront it honestly. This is why failure often receives more emotional support than success. Failure keeps hierarchy stable. Success changes it. Notice how quickly sympathy appears when someone falls apart. But sustained growth, discipline, transformation, that often receives silence, skepticism, or subtle resistance. Because failure makes people feel safe. Success makes people compare, and comparison creates emotional tension that most people hide beneath politeness. Some people even feel unconscious relief when successful individuals fail publicly. Not necessarily because they are evil, but because failure restores emotional balance. It reassures others that greatness is temporary, unstable, or dangerous. This is one of the darkest realities of human psychology. People often prefer relatable suffering over intimidating evolution, and betrayal frequently follows transformation for this exact reason. Not all betrayal looks aggressive. Sometimes betrayal is emotional withdrawal. Sometimes it is lack of support during critical moments. Sometimes it is subtle sabotage disguised as concern. Sometimes it is simply the refusal to acknowledge your growth honestly. Some people miss the version of you they could control, the version that required validation, the version that tolerated disrespect, the version that stayed psychologically predictable. Because once you develop self-respect, emotional independence, or clear ambition, certain people lose access to the influence they once had over you. And that loss creates resistance. Not everyone around you wants you destroyed, but not everyone feels comfortable watching you become powerful either. This is why transformation feels lonely. Every level of growth demands social separation from identities, environments, and relationships tied to your former self. And many people resist this separation because your evolution unintentionally forces them to confront their own fear of change. But perhaps the most important realization is this: human relationships are often built not just on love, but on balance, dependency, and unspoken hierarchy. The deeper you examine human behavior, the harder it becomes to ignore a disturbing possibility. Modern society does not eliminate competition, it industrializes it. From childhood, people are taught to present themselves strategically. Schools rank students publicly. Workplaces measure value through performance. Social media transforms identity into visible statistics. Even morality becomes reputation-based. People are rewarded not only for who they are, but for how convincingly they can appear to be the right kind of person. And over time, this creates a culture where perception becomes power, not truth, not authenticity. Perception. This is why people curate personalities. Most individuals are not presenting their full selves to the world. They are presenting socially survivable versions of themselves. Carefully edited identities designed to maximize approval, influence, desirability, and status. The modern individual becomes both actor and audience simultaneously. You can see it everywhere. The corporate employee pretending to be endlessly passionate about productivity while emotionally exhausted inside. The influencer presenting effortless happiness while privately collapsing under comparison and anxiety. The intellectual performing moral superiority online while driven by ego and recognition. The friend who appears supportive publicly but quietly, measures every interaction through invisible hierarchy. Human beings adapt themselves to systems of reward, and modern society rewards emotional performance more than emotional honesty. Because honesty is risky, performance is safer. A person who openly admits insecurity may lose social value, but a person who disguises insecurity behind confidence, humor, morality, or sophistication often gains influence instead. This is why many environments become psychologically theatrical. People learn to manage impressions carefully because reputation controls opportunity. In many situations, influence matters more than truth, not because truth is meaningless, but because human beings are emotional creatures before they are rational ones. People respond to confidence, social proof, charisma, status, and narrative far faster than they respond to objective reality. This is why manipulation works so effectively throughout history. Political movements rarely succeed through facts alone. Corporations do not sell products purely through logic. Social groups maintain power through emotional signaling, reputation management, and perceived authority. Even morality can become strategic. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes believed civilization existed partly because human beings feared each other's capacity for conflict and self-interest. Society creates rules to stabilize chaos, but beneath those rules, ambition never disappears. It simply evolves into more socially acceptable forms. And Friedrich Nietzsche understood something equally unsettling. Many people do not merely seek truth or virtue. They seek psychological power. The desire for influence shapes behavior more than most individuals are willing to admit. That does not mean humanity is hopelessly corrupt, but it does mean social interaction is often layered. People communicate through words, while simultaneously negotiating status, influence, acceptance, and identity underneath those words. This is why workplace politics feel emotionally exhausting. The competition is rarely direct. Everyone performs cooperation while quietly protecting position. People speak carefully. Disagreement becomes subtle. Ambition disguises itself as teamwork. The same dynamic exists online. Social media created an environment where individuals constantly market themselves psychologically. Every post becomes positioning. Every opinion becomes identity signaling. Every achievement becomes public evidence of worth. The result is a society where comparison never fully stops, and hidden competition becomes normalized. How much of human interaction is genuine, and how much is strategic positioning? That question unsettles people because it threatens comforting illusions about authenticity. But awareness does not require cynicism. Recognizing social dynamics is not the same as losing faith in humanity. Understanding the game does not make you manipulative. It makes you conscious. Awareness changes the battlefield because unconscious people are controlled by systems they do not recognize. They confuse appearances with intentions. They mistake performance for sincerity. They assume emotional presentation reflects emotional truth. But emotionally intelligent individuals learn to observe patterns beneath presentation. They notice who becomes uncomfortable around confidence, who disappears during transformation, who only supports safe versions of others, who performs kindness. Strategically, silence is often observation, not weakness, and power rarely announces itself loudly. Real influence is often quiet, controlled, emotionally disciplined. The people who understand social dynamics best are rarely the loudest people demanding attention. They are usually the individuals observing carefully, speaking selectively, and understanding how perception shapes behavior. The danger is not awareness itself. The danger is becoming consumed by bitterness after gaining awareness, because once someone begins noticing hidden competition everywhere, they can easily fall into paranoia, distrust, and emotional isolation. They start viewing every relationship as manipulation, every compliment as strategy, every act of kindness as hidden self-interest, but that mindset becomes its own prison. The goal is not to hate human nature. The goal is to understand it clearly enough that it no longer controls you unconsciously. And that raises the most important question of all. If hidden competition is part of human nature, how do you respond without becoming cold, paranoid, or emotionally destroyed by it? In the end, the smile was never the problem. The problem was the illusion that human beings exist without comparison, without ego, without insecurity, without hidden tension beneath social performance. Most people move through life believing relationships are simpler than they truly are. They assume support automatically means loyalty. They assume kindness always reflects pure intention. They assume emotional warmth guarantees emotional honesty. But human nature has never been that simple. A person can admire you and envy you simultaneously. They can care about you while quietly comparing themselves to you. They can celebrate your success publicly while privately struggling with what your growth reveals about their own life. And once you understand this, something inside you changes permanently, not into paranoia, not into bitterness, into awareness, because the problem is not that people compete. The problem is believing they do not. Competition is deeply human. Envy is deeply human. Comparison is deeply human. Civilization did not erase these instincts. It simply taught people how to hide them behind social etiquette, emotional intelligence, and carefully managed appearances. That is why some of the most important battles in life are never spoken aloud. They exist in silence, in energy, in subtle shifts of behavior, in the emotional distance that appears when one person begins evolving beyond the expectations others had for them. Some people will clap for you while hoping you slow down, not because they are monsters, but because your transformation forces them to confront themselves. And most human beings spend their lives trying to avoid uncomfortable self-confrontation. This understanding changes the way you move through the world. You become calmer, more observant, less emotionally reactive. You stop expecting perfection from flawed people. You stop needing universal approval. You stop confusing attention with loyalty or politeness with sincerity. And perhaps most importantly, you stop taking every hidden tension personally, because once you understand human nature, betrayal stops feeling shocking. And that understanding changes the way you move through the world. Not every smile is fake, but not every smile is harmless. That sentence alone explains more about adulthood than many people ever fully realize. The mature mind learns to hold two truths at the same time. Human beings are capable of love, and human beings are capable of hidden rivalry. These truths coexist constantly. The moment you understand silent competition, you stop confusing appearances with truth. And strangely, this realization does not disconnect you from humanity. It connects you to reality more honestly. You begin seeing people not as perfect heroes or villains, but as psychologically complex individuals shaped by fear, ego, insecurity, ambition, and emotional contradiction, including yourself. Because even you are not fully free from comparison. No one is. The difference is whether awareness controls you or frees you. A calm person sees hidden tension without becoming consumed by it. An emotionally disciplined person recognizes manipulation without becoming manipulative themselves. A wise person understands insecurity without becoming hateful toward insecure people. That is the real transformation. Not dominance, not superiority. Clarity. The kind of clarity that makes you harder to deceive, harder to emotionally control, and harder to destabilize through social games. Because once illusion disappears, performance loses power over you, and maybe that is what maturity truly is. Learning to see human nature clearly without losing yourself in the darkness of it. You are not losing faith in people. You are learning to see them clearly.